Echo has released and has dropped all 5 episodes in one day. I have my own theories as to why they decided to do this, but I will talk more about that in the conclusion of this video. So, without any further ado, let's get this binge watch started. Wow, they really want you to know that this is supposed to be an R-rated MCU show, don't they? What surprised me though is that I didn't even know this was supposed to be part of their new Spotlight label. I guess this show has more to prove now. Let's see if that label really means something, because that's 2 disclaimers they have given us with this R rating. And immediately, I didn't get a good first impression with the opening scene. They have scary music playing, even though nothing about this scene is scary, and the scene proves it by playing normal tribal music about 10 seconds later. That was weird. I think they played the scary music to remind you that this is the grown-up show. I don't know if that's what they were doing or not, but the sudden dark tone came off as a little desperate if you ask me, especially because nothing dark was happening here. And then we get the rest of the episode, and I gotta tell ya, it wasn't terrible or anything, but I felt like I was just watching for the sake of it. If an Echo show sounded boring to you, then this episode isn't going to do anything to convince you otherwise. So we see a young Echo blaming herself for her mother's death, and it felt very poorly written. It seemed like a ripoff of Bruce Wayne's guilt. Young Bruce insisted that they leave the theater, and that's what ultimately led to his parents getting shot in the alley, so him blaming himself made sense. But here, the mother is the one who insisted that she go to get hot chocolate, and then the accident happened. Not to mention, we find that someone had rigged her brakes, so whether it was today or the next time she got in the car, she was gonna die in a car crash. So Echo blaming herself just felt like the show was forcefully trying to create additional drama, and to give our hero some guilt and self-doubt. But it didn't do it organically or in a way that made sense. And this episode had a lot of bad writing like that, such as Echo separating from her cousin at a little age. The scene should start off with her cousin realizing that they're being separated from each other, but it's not until they're driving away for quite a long while that she suddenly realizes what's happening. And that was also a very weird scene, not just with its writing, but also with its directing. And then there's weird supernatural dialogue where she's being told that you're going between 2 worlds. It's so freaking weird and quick. This is not organic dialogue, this is very cliche movie dialogue. We just saw her mother die and her separate from her cousin, and now we are getting this superhero foreshadowing. So my first impressions of the writing for the show is that it's very bad. The same with the directing and editing. And the worst part is, you see all the tragedies of her childhood, and I really just couldn't care less. I was just watching it with a dull expression on my face, and so was my younger brother. And that's because they go through her origin so fast in this one episode. And it's very badly edited and incredibly choppy with its directing. Now I did like how Kingpin tries to manipulate Echo by telling her that his father died too. The funny thing about this is that he's not telling her that he is the one that killed his father. But that really depends on if this show is making the Netflix series canon, which Disney said they were not going to do, because they think they know better clearly, so they're gonna do a soft reboot. As for the action, the CG blood looked cool at times, but it also looked really fake at times too. Daredevil doesn't look like CGI this time, and his action scene with Echo was actually pretty fun to watch, and his presentation style was much better than in She-Hulk, where he turned into a CGI, walking, talking, and smiling cartoon. The only downside of this action scene is that they try to do Daredevil's infamous one-shot action sequence, and whenever the MCU attempts to do that in their shows, you can always see where the cuts are. Hawkeye had this problem too, and Marvel really need to work on that. It says a lot that with Disney's bigger budgets, they are still not able to outdo the cheaper Netflix shows. And going back to Daredevil, I wonder if he shows up in the future episodes, because if this is it, this felt like a forced cameo. They tried to justify it, but it still felt forced. How did Kingpin know that Daredevil was watching? That being said, I like how they tied Echo into the Hawkeye show. The downside is that those connections, as well as the majority of this episode, felt edited to shit. Again, everything is just moving so damn fast, and it makes you question why this character is even having a show in the first place. Each scene feels like a series of small YouTube clips that were merged together, and it feels more like a clip show rather than an episode. It just goes from scene to scene so quickly. So as an episode, I thought this was very bad and sloppily edited together. But it did have a few good scenes in it, and even though they toned it down, some of the MCU style humor still remains. And the R rating was pretty cool in this episode, mainly with the car crash, but they didn't linger on the injuries as long as I would expect. But it's okay for a first episode, I guess. Here's hoping they go further in the upcoming episodes, but I really doubt that they will. But yeah, that's about it. My score for this episode is an average 5 out of 10. The only other thing I'll mention is that this first episode has a trailer at the end teasing the rest of the season. I'm guessing Marvel thought no one would want to continue watching after the first episode, so they tried to convince them to stick around by teasing a whole load of Kingpin. That's my guess anyway. And quite frankly, if I wasn't making this video, I wouldn't have watched the rest of the episodes. Because after watching episode 1, I don't feel like watching episode 2 at all. But for you guys, I will. So, here goes. This whole opening was just boring. My brother looked at his phone occasionally, and so did I. I hope this isn't just a filler subplot to fill the 5 episodes, because come on, Marvel should be able to accommodate 5 episodes easily. And if they can't accommodate just 5 episodes, they might as well just give up doing TV shows altogether. And there was some more dumb comedy from Echo's family members. It isn't as bad as some other jokes in the MCU, but it does clash with the darker tone that this show is attempting to go for, especially when you factor in their new Spotlight label. I thought we were supposed to be leaving this goofy shit behind. The action in this episode is a train chase where she plants a bomb, and this was a boring action scene. Her leg getting trapped was a good moment, but the rest was just boring. The bomb she sets explodes, and her sister has now found out that she's here because Biscuits, yeah, that is actually his name, in this more mature show. Told you the MCU tone is still here.
It's our first TVMA. We didn't have to pull any punches throughout the whole show.
But anyway, Biscuits clumsily name drops her. And the acting when he name drops her was so unconvincing. Again, bad directing and even forced writing, because this little accidental reveal felt so poorly staged. And then the episode ends with Echo being told that her actions are resulting in her starting a war with Kingpin, which she doesn't care because she wants to become the Queenpin. She fires her gun a few times and the episode ends. Yeah, I felt like nothing really happened in this episode. Technically, the 2 biggest things that happened is her starting a war with Kingpin and her cousin knowing she's back. But the way it unfolded felt so uneventful and dull. This episode was just bad. The first episode was scrambled together in the editing room, but it felt like more was happening. This episode just felt like there was a bunch of filler that may or may not be relevant when the show is over. Regardless, it makes much more sense why Disney didn't want to release these episodes weekly, because they knew that there would be nothing bringing us back week after week. So dropping the episodes all at once is the only way they thought people might watch the show till the very end. And it didn't work because, like I said, if I wasn't making this video, I would have stopped watching after episode 1. So yeah, very boring and uneventful episode, and it gets a 2 out of 10. And that opening competition reminded me of the opening sports match in Wonder Woman 1984, and just like that scene, I felt like this could have been cut. But let's wait and see if it actually connects to anything. This opening just felt like a gimmick to trick us into thinking that we're watching a creative show, and they're not fooling me. Anyway, just like the sports match, I don't know what this scene is supposed to mean, I guess we'll find out, but what God mode cheat code does she have on that others don't? She's not even hiding behind cover like the others are. And are we supposed to be taking this seriously? I mean, at least pull a Mulan, make sure that she uses her intuition or something, but just standing out in the open, taking everyone out? This is just dumb. Also, this forest looks like the same one where Joss Whedon filmed Ben Affleck and Gal Gadot in Justice League. I found that funny. Anyway, some thugs come to get Echo's uncle here, and I like how he tells Bonnie to leave with sign language. This was smart, that he signaled her to go, and it actually worked.
Dispatch Mr. Pope.
Until it didn't. And I gotta say, these henchmen are cartoony as fuck. This should be an intense scene, especially for an R-rated show, and with their new Spotlight label. Instead, it was just goofy. I mean, seriously, these henchmen are so cartoony. On the plus side, this action scene was good, but the final hit to the black guy made no sense. We never saw her pocket this thing, and somehow it managed to crush his face. Also, after she beats all these guys, leaving the leader for last, we suddenly jump cut to a room full of thugs and Echo is tied up. Like, what? What just happened? Seriously, what the hell just happened? You can't just do that, Marvel. I mean, the editing was pretty good in that action scene, and then it went back to shit. Seriously, we're in episode 3 and the editing is still a problem. And then they very conveniently get saved at the last minute with a phone call from someone, and it's obviously Kingpin. So after all that, this was the best episode so far. Now, it got an easy win because this was a held hostage and breakout episode, and those are pretty hard to screw up, even though punching her cousin in the face as part of her plan was just stupid. A push would have done the same thing, and they lock Echo in a room where there is a bunch of stuff she can use, and yeah, this whole escape attempt was really dumb. Seriously, a ton of bad writing here. But I liked the basic interaction between Echo and her cousin, and I did get some more personality out of Echo's character this time round. So this episode was a bit more fun, and unlike the last episode, it actually had a fun action sequence, even if it did completely tank with its ending. The episode ends with her getting a new leg, and the first genuinely good joke in this show. Then we get a boring conversation and Kingpin shows up. The end. Yeah, this was definitely the best episode of the show, although everything before the hostage situation, I can't even remember what happened, which is shocking because I literally just watched the episode. So all that stuff was just boring and forgettable, and the flashbacks she gets to her ancestors, that stuff also still feels boring, and the villains were just straight up goofy. So in the end, this episode gets a high 5 out of 10. So this is where it happens. Episode 4 is where we get the trailer clip of Kingpin punching the ice cream man, and it was a good scene. But the only thing I'll say is that it's practically the same in length to what we saw in the trailer, and although the scene itself was pretty good, I was disappointed that we didn't get more. And again, the R rating felt like it was pulling back. I thought Kingpin was going to beat the guy to death, but he's still alive, and I didn't think the beating was as violent as it was in the trailer. Anyway, this is a more heavy Kingpin episode, and Vincent D'Onofrio, as always, does a great job. He is definitely playing his Netflix version of the character, with even his clothes being more appropriate, as opposed to the frickin' Hawaiian shirt they made him wear in Hawkeye. Kingpin would never wear something as tacky and colourful as that. The Netflix show even went as far as to show you his dress routine, but here, he seems much more accurate to what he was, and the two have a dinner together, and this is the best scene in the entire show so far. What makes this scene stand out is that it's the only time in this show where we get some good tension, and they managed to combine it with some good humor. Not comedy, humor. There's something funny about the Kingpin trying to be funny, because this whole encounter is about trust. Can she trust Kingpin? And he's not doing any MCU jokes. The humor feels natural here. And Echo doesn't trust him, and you can tell that he is manipulating her. And this carries on throughout most of the scene, and the bit with the knife was really good. He offers Echo the empire that she's looking to create if she comes back home with him, and he says he'll wait for her as private jet. Then we get an explanation as to what these visions are that Echo has been getting, and we learn that her mother was a healer. And quite frankly, I didn't care. Again, it was so boring. It was full of exposition, and the family struggle just felt like it was copied from countless other basic TV dramas. You chose yourself, I was just a child. How many times have you heard drama like that in a TV show? It all felt like a trope. It was kind of ridiculous, and I just flat out didn't care. Again, the bad writing comes into play here. And the song that continued to play when Echo took out her gun seemed like an editing mistake. The scene needed more of a build-up with intense music, but instead, the song number kept playing. On a better note, this episode confirms that the Netflix Daredevil show is now canon. Yup, after all that begging we did, Disney Marvel thought that they were so high and mighty that they could start fresh and reinvent Daredevil and Kingpin, and kill Karen and Foggy, and introduce their own new characters and story. And well, this proves they've realized they can't reinvent shit. So they have now allowed the different studio characters to be folded into their universe, which is exactly what they're doing with the X-Men and Deadpool 3. I'm just pissed that it took them this long, and that they only listened to us after they fucked up so hard and had to cancel and reboot their Daredevil show. It says a lot when the most interesting parts of the MCU are non-MCU characters. The episode closes out with Echo not going with Fisk, and then it does this. Yeah, really allows you to take in Kingpin's mental state and frustration. It's not off-tone or distracting at all. So I'll say this. Kingpin was the best part of the episode. I liked the interaction between the two, there were some real standout moments, but this episode just confirmed to me that I don't care about his interest in Echo. I was willing to give it a chance and see where it went, and in this episode, it actually made me like Echo's character, but at the same time, this episode did not convince me of her connection with Kingpin. And this is supposed to be the big episode that is meant to convince us of his connection to her, and I just really couldn't care less. I just wanted him to stop this pointless subplot and get back to his own stories. And although the Kingpin stuff was good, the rest of the episode was just as weak and boring as the previous episodes. The only reason this episode gets any points at all is because of the Kingpin scenes, but the rest, I just couldn't care less. So this episode, again, gets a 5 out of 10. And we now have one final episode left, and I gotta say, It doesn't even feel like we've been building to a final episode. It doesn't feel like we have been building to anything. Probably because there wasn't anything to build up to. The only thing I can guess is that Kingpin is mad and is gonna go after her family or something. But is that what this show has been setting up from episode 1? If it was, then we certainly had to sit through a lot of filler to get to it. I mean, if that is what it's been leading to, then this story should have been much more streamlined and simple, with Kingpin coming after Echo. That's what the 5 episodes should have been about, especially when you consider that Kingpin is the best thing in this show anyway. So yeah, I guess we'll see how this show ends with the final episode of Echo. What the heck did I just watch? Echo sees her mum, who actually talks to her, and then uses her healing abilities to heal her heart. What, she couldn't heal her leg, she couldn't heal her voice and give her the ability to talk, and Echo couldn't use this ability to heal her father. This whole healing ability really felt like it was pulled out of their ass at the last second. There is even very bad writing where they don't talk about stuff that the show should have addressed. Kingpin says that he's gonna kill Echo's family like he killed her father, and I can't believe that they forgot to have the two talk about her father during their dinner, but it was completely ignored. Great writing there, Marvel. And then we get to the final action scene. Echo's hands glow and she shares her powers with her cousin and grandma. And then her ancestors show up behind her and it was so corny. It also felt like they were trying to push some kind of girl power moment against Kingpin. But it all happened so fast that not only did it look silly, but I had questions. And when grandma gets powers, look at this face. This is not the look you put on the face of Marvel's best villain. And then they follow it up with this. And why is Kingpin scared? Because isn't this MCU Kingpin supposed to have super strength? In Hawkeye, he survived an explosion, a car being slammed into him, and a bullet to the eye. But this scares him and turns him into a wimp. What the hell is going on here? And for an R-rated show, the stakes are absolutely minuscule. If they were true to their stance on making this an R rating, then Kingpin would have absolutely exploded for Echo leaving him, and Echo's family would have gotten brutally killed right in front of her. But he is just reduced to a bitch, and gets dealt with like he is one of the most incompetent villains ever. I don't buy for a second that this Kingpin could fight Daredevil if this old lady scares him. And to make things worse, Kingpin doesn't even get to fight. Look at that. How pathetic. Going back to that previous scene, Echo sees her mother and she's told that all women with abilities like them live inside of Echo and that the ancestors will help her whenever she needs it. And this sounded like Avatar stuff. It just felt so sudden and bizarre that she has these abilities, and I do think that the supernatural element of this show was completely out of place, especially given how this show is trying to be more grounded and realistic. And speaking of Avatar stuff, Echo pulls an Avatar trick on Kingpin and takes his his anger away or something. I don't even know if it worked. And then the Kingpin leaves and starts wailing and crying like a baby.
What did you do?
This was one hell of a cheap and rushed ending, like pretty much all of the MCU shows. Only this just made the Kingpin look weak, and also like a bitch. And on top of all that, those goofy villains return and are even goofier. Biscuits very quickly takes out the henchman with a monster truck that he found somewhere, and the goofy leader had the most cartoonish death ever in the MCU.
Wait, what?
What kind of cartoonish death is this?
Wait, what?
And if, like me, you didn't like the supernatural stuff, too bad, because that's how the Kingpin and his goons get defeated. And then we get a quick and rushed conclusion with all the characters alive and well, because Disney Marvel don't have any balls. This was a painfully mediocre show, but that rushed final episode has turned it into a shit show. And if this is the kind of R-rated street-level superhero shows we can expect from the MCU, then be afraid. Be very afraid. This episode gets a 1 out of 10, and the show as a whole gets a 2. And that Kingpin credit scene, that was such a lazy and forced way of setting up Daredevil Born Again.
Most voters want somebody who is a fighter. A bare-knuckled brawler would do well in this race, an outsider, somebody who is not afraid to take on the establishment.
Is that candidate even out there?
I can't believe they actually said we need a bare-knuckled fighter, someone who's an outsider. How on the nose could you get? They might as well have described even more of Kingpin's character traits. Someone who's got a big bald head, someone who killed his father with a hammer, and also has a wife called Vanessa.
Is that candidate even out there?
If this is the kind of subtlety we can expect in the MCU's Daredevil show, then we are fucked. I actually think that we would have been better served if we didn't get this show and just got the next season of Daredevil with Kingpin reprising his role. But doing it this way, it just didn't work. And after seeing this show, I don't think they should even attempt the Daredevil show, and it's clear that they don't know how to use the R rating. This show's story could have been a PG-13 easily, and nothing would have changed. And Daredevil needs a mature R-rated story with intelligent writing, just like his Netflix shows. But he sure as heck won't get that from the MCU.
My ass remains unwhooped.
I mean seriously, Grandma turns into the grandma from Blue Beetle, except that was intended to be a more kid-friendly movie, and this is supposed to be the R-rated show. What the hell are they playing at? They ruined Kingpin's character and turned him into a bitch. I mean, he was practically like,
"What did you do? What have you done to me? Look at me! I'm an anchovy!"
Leave it to Marvel to turn him into a generic MCU villain, and then he runs away like a little girl.
"What have you done to me? Look at me! I'm an anchovy!"
He didn't even land a single punch in the climax. That's how rushed it was. And I would actually go as far as to say that Marvel ruined his character here. I can't look at him the same way anymore going forward. Look at him running away like a bitch over there. It was rumored that Disney considered shelving the show with a tax write-off like Warner Brothers did to Batgirl. But then the writer's strike happened and they were short on content, so they just decided to release it. Hence, they dumped it all on day one so those who wanted to watch it could watch it and then never speak of it again. This is so messy. I just have so many questions. How does Echo have super strength? And from what I've heard, Echo has none of these powers in the comics. In the comics, her powers are meant to be like Taskmaster, someone who can study and copy the exact fighting styles of her opponents. But I guess Marvel thought, shit, we already did a female Taskmaster, so we can't do it again. So let's do this whole Ancestor Avatar stuff instead and make her another Black Panther, because the whole Ancestor stuff also gave me Black Panther vibes. So yeah, this was just a mess and shows that Marvel are just not planning these in advance. Because if they were, then they would realize that they can't do one female Taskmaster when they've got another one right around the corner. The action scenes are good, but they don't stack up at all to the Netflix shows, especially Daredevil. The R rating was wasted. Some people say they're easing us into it, and I am done with that argument. For crying out loud, just quit playing around and actually do it. So many other properties have been going hard PG-13s and hard Rs, and meanwhile, Marvel were making sissy PG-13 movies, and once they finally go rated R, they turn it into a frickin' cartoon. And this is supposed to be part of their hardcore label, and it still feels like it's holding back. So the Spotlight label means absolutely nothing. This show has just cemented that the MCU have no frickin' idea what they're doing, and this proves that under the MCU's supervision, we are going to get some really bad Daredevil. They might do the action decent, but it won't even compare to Netflix's version. I'm calling it right now. And let me ask you, what's the biggest thing that Kingpin himself has done in the MCU? He beat up an ice cream man, and that's it. Prior to that, he got his ass handed to him by Kate Bishop, who was a novice and a newbie. He got a car rammed into him by Kate Bishop's mother. He got shot in the eye by Echo, and he didn't land a single punch, got scared of Echo's granny, and ran away like a bitch when Echo took his bending away or whatever.
It's our first TVMA. We didn't have to pull any punches throughout the whole show.
Kingpin has been in 2 MCU shows, and Kevin Feige has not done anything with him. If anything, they've ruined him and stripped him of his dignity. And now there's talk that they want him to be the new street-level Thanos. If they have these big plans for him, then why are they turning him into a bitch? Because who wants this wimpy, Disneyfied Kingpin as a big MCU villain? I would have liked the Netflix version as a big villain, but not this childish version. Seriously, what the fuck is Kevin Feige doing? He wants Kang to be the big, intimidating villain of the MCU, and he gets beat by Ant-Man and takes it like a bitch. He wants Kingpin to be the big villain of the street-level heroes, and he gets beat by Kate Bishop and Echo, and again, like a bitch. Feige supposedly has big plans for these villains, and yet he constantly ruins them in their debut. He deprives them of their dignity, and audiences no longer fear them or see them as a threat. And if these villains can't even handle basic D-list superheroes, then how on earth are they going to handle themselves against the freaking Avengers or X-Men or Spider-Man? I think Kevin Feige has completely lost his marbles. He really needs to just get the hell out, because he is single-handedly destroying these villains, one of which was already set up and gift-wrapped for him. Do you seriously think that with this track record that he is going to do a good job with Doctor Doom? Any chance that the MCU has of being put on the right track with these bright spots, Kevin Feige is systematically taking them down and destroying them. And I think they should either reboot the entire MCU or just put it out of its misery. What a freaking disgrace of a show. Comment below with your thoughts on this matter, and check out my Patreon for some amazing perks, some of which are extremely limited, so you better get in there fast. If you can't, then that's quite alright. If you can instead give this video a like and a share, that will go a long way towards expanding my channel and reaching new viewers. And don't forget to click that subscribe button and the bell right next to it so you can stay up to date with all future videos. Thank you very much for watching another video, everyone, and I will catch all of you very soon. Take care.